So I live in Austin, and I have an undergraduate Bachelor of Fine Arts in printmaking from the University of Texas, which is literally 2 miles south of where I am right this minute. So I originally began as a printmaker. I really loved printmaking. I never really wanted to stop making prints, but it's just not a really I used to make lithographs. It involves a lot of kind of fancy equipment. I didn't have it coming out of school. And so I kind of made my way into making more textile kind of things. I felt like some of the drawings I had previously made really reminded me of some of those textiles, and I knew nothing about sewing or textiles really, but sometimes that's a good place to start. That kind of led me to be interested in dyeing fabric and all sorts of patterning techniques, and it's led me all over the kind of the textile world, to everything from designing fabric for fabric companies to making quilts, both kind of that are entirely made or entirely intended for like galleries, to ones that are just about writing the pattern for others to make, to writing books that are mostly geared towards people remaking the designs that you have made. To just selling the textile work that I have now. This is where I do all my dyeing, and then upstairs in my house I have a sewing space as well. But I spend a lot of time down here. Jeans were like this, or denim was this image of, it was the ultimate cool thing, and my parents, having come from even much more, I'm not from this country originally, we're all immigrants. So this idea of, wearing denim was really kind of outside their wheelhouse for sure. So it was like this entry point into American culture, I think, for me as a kid. And so yeah, it was just really informed when I was ready to become my own person. I think the whole idea, I think textiles are such a big part of who we are. And I definitely felt like that was a big part of becoming, integrated into this culture, versus there was always this conflict when you're an immigrant between the culture that you came from and the culture that you're entering into. So maybe that's a lot to put on a pair of jeans, but that's how I felt about it. I always think, how can I take these materials and make the most simple, most graphic image without too many bells and whistles, and my inclination is to add and add and add and add. So there's always this kind of battle against that. When I was in art school, I had a life drawing teacher, and he was just there for like a semester or so. And I came into his class into like a critique. We had these like one-on-one critiques one day, and I had done these drawings and I'd done all this like stuff in the background. And so he asked me, was that stuff there during the model, when the model was there? I said, no, I just kind of added it. And he was like, it doesn't belong there. It's not about the story about what was actually happening at that point. And it's always kind of stuck with me, this idea of being kind of as essential, everything down to what's absolutely needed. And it's always this kind of struggle, I always like, well, what if I added this? And what if I added this? And I'm always like, this voice in the back of my head is saying, no, what do you absolutely have to have? And so when I think about making a new piece, I want to delete all the extraneous and just focus on what absolutely needs to be there. Right now, I'm really lousy at naming quilts, so I called it the denim quilt. When I first got the jeans and the denim in the mail, I wanted to use up as much of it as possible, because I feel like that in itself is part of my ethos, is to use up what you've got, and not to purchase or anything new, not to have it be about new materials, have it all be about things I already had on hand. I wanted to use something that is just, kind of an essential to my everyday existence. I wanted to use up the denim, and then I wanted to use something that had kind of a sentimental quality that I've altered in some way. So on the back and on one side of the binding, which is like that edging that you create to kind of encase the edges of the quilt, I used a vintage sheet and it's vintage because it came from my parents' house, that I overdyed into like a mustard color. And I felt like that was actually very personal. You wouldn't know this, but that was very personal for me. My parents are quite elderly now, and they're both not in such great shape. They live in a nursing home, and just in the past, since the pandemic, in the past even 6 months of the pandemic, my brother and I have gone through their house and, sold the stuff and sold the house. And some of these sheets and stuff are some of the few things that I brought back. And I wanted to incorporate that into this piece in some way. So there's a couple things. Anybody who's familiar with quilts will recognize kind of the underlying pattern. It's called a log cabin, which is a super traditional pattern, but it's been I'm not even the millionth person to reinterpret this pattern. I have done in the past a lot of these kind of like large scale, kind of almost half square. So, half of it is one big triangle and the other half is another big triangle. Obviously, this is not constructed of just two big triangles. It's built out from the center out of these little logs, and that's why they call it the log cabin. So a lot of my work is informed by like traditional quilt making, the traditional patterns. But I want to use them in a new way. I like really upscaling what oftentimes is a small block. I like doing it on a much bigger scale. So a lot of that kind of informed this particular piece.